A man's true character is revealed not by the wealth he displays, but by the secrets he keeps. For Julian Thorne, a New York millionaire, his secrets were about to collide at 30,000 feet. He boarded a private jet to Geneva for the business deal of a lifetime, his beautiful young mistress, Chloe, sipping champagne by his side. He believed he was flying toward a future of unlimited power, leaving his quiet, predictable wife, Amelia, behind in their Upper East Side apartment. What he didn't know was that his wife wasn't just at home. She was waiting for him in Geneva, and she wasn't just a wife, she was the secret investor about to decide his fate. The penthouse apartment on Park Avenue was silent, but not peaceful. It was the heavy, oppressive silence of things left unsaid, a stillness that hummed with the fluorescent glow of the skyline. Julian Thorne stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, a tumbler of expensive Macallan 25 in his hand, the amber liquid catching the lights of Manhattan. He was a man carved from ambition, his reflection showing a sharp suit, a face that was still handsome, but hardening with the constant pressure of financial warfare. His company, Thorne Dynamics, a once dominant logistics empire, was bleeding. It was a slow, internal hemorrhage that no one on the outside could see. But Julian felt it every day in the frantic pulse in his wrist. This trip to Geneva was everything. It wasn't just a deal, it was a lifeline. "Must you pack so much, Amelia?" he said, not turning. His voice, usually so commanding in boardrooms, was clipped and impatient in his own home. Across the cavernous living room, Amelia Thorne, formerly Amelia Redwood Vance, paused, her hands resting on a simple, elegant leather suitcase. She was the woman he had married 12 years ago, the perfect wife. Demure, intelligent, and most importantly, from a family whose name had opened doors his own disruptive tactics could not. She was, he thought, the ultimate status symbol, one that had conveniently settled into the background of his life. Her appearance was one of carefully curated simplicity, classic cashmere, simple pearls, hair always impeccably styled. Tonight, she looked tired, but her eyes, the color of a winter sea, were clear and observant. "It is a charity gala, Julian," she replied, her voice soft. "My sister is hosting. It requires a few changes of wardrobe." "Right. The gala." He scoffed, swirling the scotch. "While you're sipping lukewarm champagne and discussing auction items, I'll be saving this company. Our company." Amelia's fingers tightened on the suitcase handle. "I am well aware of the importance of your meeting, Julian. You've mentioned it." "Mentioned it?" He finally turned, his face a mask of incredulous stress. "Amelia, this isn't just a meeting. This is Vanguard Equity Partners. This is the AR of Vance. Do you have any idea who that is?" "A notoriously private investment consortium, I believe. Very little is known about its principal," she said calmly, reciting the facts she had read. "Very little is known?" Julian laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "They're a ghost, a $1 trillion ghost, and they've finally agreed to a face-to-face. Their capital injection won't just float us, it will make us untouchable. I've been chasing this for 2 years. 2 years. And you're packing for a party." He saw the flicker in her eyes, but mistook it for hurt. It was, in fact, pity. "I wish you success, Julian, truly." "I don't need wishes, Amelia. I need focus, which is why," he said, walking over to his own sleek aluminum Rimowa briefcase. "I'll be taking the Gulf Stream tomorrow morning. I need to be sharp. No commercial flights, no distractions." "Of course," she said. "I'll be leaving for Boston around the same time. I'll have Thomas take me to LaGuardia." "Fine." He finished his drink in one aggressive swallow, the ice clinking sharply. He strode past her, deliberately not making eye contact, and disappeared into his study. The heavy door clicked shut. Amelia stood alone in the vast room for a long moment. The mask of the dutiful wife dissolved. Her posture straightened, the weariness replaced by a cold, sharp energy. She walked over to the window he had just vacated, looking down at the city that was her chessboard. He was so consumed by his own reflection, he never saw the player staring back. She pulled out her own phone, a simple, unadorned device. Not the one Julian knew. This one held her real life. She sent a single, encrypted text to a number saved as Mr. Harrison. The reply was instantaneous. She deleted the exchange. She looked back at the closed study door. He was in there, she knew, not just reviewing spreadsheets. He was calling her. Inside the study, Julian had his back to the door, his voice now a low, intimate murmur. I know. I just got away. Yes, she's going to Boston. Some charity thing. Perfect timing. Of course you're coming. Did you ever doubt it? Pack your best. I want you to see Geneva. A pause, and he smiled, a genuine, predatory smile Amelia hadn't seen in years. Don't worry about the wife, Chloe, he whispered. She has no idea how the real world works. Now, tell me what you're wearing. Outside, Amelia closed her suitcase. The click of the latch was loud and final, like the cocking of a gun. She had packed for a gala, yes, but the gala was in Geneva, and she was the guest of honor. The early morning light was a cold, metallic grey, washing over the sterile luxury of the private tarmac at Teterboro Airport. Julian Thorne, immaculate in a dark Loro Piana travel suit, stepped out of his black Escalade and onto the steps of the Gulfstream G150. He had given Amelia a perfunctory, cold kiss on the cheek hours earlier in their lobby, a pantomime of a goodbye for the doorman. He had felt the familiar, brief sting of guilt, followed by the immediate, intoxicating rush of freedom. He was escaping. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne," the pilot, a man named Peters, greeted him. "We are wheels up in 15. Flight path is clear to Geneva." "Excellent, Peters. We have one more passenger," Julian said, checking his Cartier watch. As if summoned, a red Ferrari screeched to a halt on the tarmac, a flagrant breach of protocol that Julian found, in this instance, amusing. The door opened, and Chloe Vance emerged. She was 24, a former intern in his marketing department, and possessed a beauty so vibrant it was almost violent. She wore white leather pants, a sheer blouse, and sunglasses that covered half her face, her blonde hair streaming behind her. She was the antithesis of Amelia, loud, demanding, and utterly, nakedly ambitious. "Julian, darling," she squealed, running to him and kissing him hard. "I thought you'd leave without me. This traffic was a nightmare." "I wouldn't dream of it," he murmured, his hand sliding down her back. He felt the familiar jolt of possession, the thrill of the taboo. Taking her on this trip was reckless, but it felt like a power move. It was a celebration of the success he was about to secure. "Is this it?" she said, looking up at the sleek jet. "It's nice. Is it new?" "It'll get us there," Julian said, guiding her up the steps. Inside, the cabin was a sea of cream leather and polished walnut. A flight attendant was already pouring champagne. Veuve Clicquot. "Thank God," Chloe breathed, sinking into a seat. "I cannot wait to get out of New York, and away from, well, you know." She made a vague gesture, dismissing his entire domestic life. "To Geneva," Julian said, clinking his glass with hers. "And to Vanguard." "To us," Chloe corrected, leaning in. "When this deal is done, Julian, you have to promise me. No more hiding. I am so tired of being your secret. I deserve to be seen." "When this deal closes," Julian said, the champagne and the altitude already making him feel invincible. "I can do anything. anything I want. He saw his future, a new dynamic life with Chloe, his company revitalized, the old Amelia surgically and cleanly removed. As their jet taxied and soared into the sky, banking east over the Atlantic, another far more discreet departure was taking place from LaGuardia. Amelia Thorne, in a simple but impeccably cut navy trouser suit, sat in the muted, anonymous comfort of a first-class commercial cabin. She had her laptop open, but the screen was angled away from her seatmate. She wasn't reviewing charity auction items. She was analyzing the final debt-to-equity ratios of Thorne Dynamics. Her phone, the other phone, vibrated. It was Mr. Harrison, her COO at Vanguard Equity Partners. Subject is airborne. Manifest confirmed 2 passengers, J. Thorne, C. Vance. Amelia's face remained impassive. Chloe Vance. He had actually brought her. He had brought the intern he'd been sleeping with for 8 months, the one he thought she knew nothing about, to the most important meeting of his life. The audacity was breathtaking. It was so Julian. She had known about Chloe for 6 of those 8 months. The private investigator's report had been clinical, thorough, and heartbreaking. But the heartbreak had cooled quickly, solidifying into something harder and more useful: resolve. Her marriage was a casualty. Her family's legacy was not. Julian believed she was Amelia Thorne, the quiet wife whose family money was a passive, abstract thing she barely understood. He had no idea that her father, Arthur Redwood Vance, had not just left her a fortune. He had left her an education. He had trained her since she was 16 to take over the real family business. Not the public-facing Redwood Foundation charity work, but the silent, powerful entity of Vanguard Equity Partners. ARV was not some unknown man. It was Amelia Redwood Vance. Julian had been frantically trying to get a meeting with A.R. Vance for 2 years, leveraging his connection to the Redwood family, never once imagining the Vance in the firm's name was his own wife's. He thought her maiden name was just Redwood. She had carefully, surgically, kept that part of her identity separate. "Another coffee, ma'am?" the flight attendant asked. "Please," Amelia said, offering a polite, distant smile. "And a bottle of water. I have a long day of meetings when we land." As Julian and Chloe dozed in their pressurized cabin, high on champagne and arrogance, Amelia worked. She cross-referenced the assets Julian had leveraged for his last-ditch loans. She saw the properties, the stock portfolios, the art. And she saw it. He had leveraged the deed to their Park Avenue penthouse. Not just his half, her half, too. He had forged her signature. She closed the laptop. The quiet hum of the Boeing's engines was the only sound. The fog of her sadness was gone, burned away by a clean, white-hot rage. He wasn't just trying to save his company. He was trying to gamble with her legacy. He was trying to pay for his mistress with her father's money. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their initial descent into Boston. It was a short, simple flight, a decoy. She would land, walk through the terminal, exit to a waiting car, and be driven not to a charity gala, but to Logan Airport's private aviation wing. Her own jet, a faster, more advanced Bombardier Global 7500, registered to a Shell corporation in Delaware, was waiting. She would be in Geneva 6 hours before him. She would be rested, prepared, and waiting. The board, her board, was already assembled. The trap was set. All the mouse had to do was arrive for the cheese. Geneva was a portrait of crisp, old-world precision. The air off the lake was cool, and the city operated with the quiet, expensive hum of a Swiss watch. Julian's Gulfstream touched down at Geneva Airport with a smoothness that felt symbolic. He was in his element. He was a conqueror. "Ah, Genève," Chloe said, pulling off her silk sleep mask. "It's so clean. Julian, we must go to the Rue du Rhône. I need a new watch, a Patek Philippe, to celebrate. First, the deal, my love. Then we buy the entire street," Julian said, fastening his cufflinks. He felt the familiar thrill of the hunt. He had this. The elusive A.R. Vance had finally agreed to a meeting, which meant the hard part was over. The meeting was a formality, a final handshake. Vanguard needed a foothold in U.S. logistics, and he was handing it to them. A black Mercedes Maybach was waiting for them on the tarmac. As they settled into the opulent leather, Julian's phone buzzed. It was an email from Mr. Harrison, the representative for Vanguard. "Mr. Thorne, we are pleased to welcome you to Geneva. Your accommodations are confirmed at the Four Seasons Hotel de Bergue. The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, 10:00 a.m. at our headquarters. A car will collect you at 09:30. We trust your journey was pleasant. Cordially, M. R. Harrison, Office of the Principal." "Four Seasons. Presidential suite, I hope?" Chloe asked, already texting pictures to her friends. "They're handling it," Julian said, impressed. "They're old school, professional. This is how real money moves, Chloe. Quietly." He didn't notice the discrepancy. He hadn't told Harrison where he was staying, nor had he asked them to book a room. He assumed it was a professional courtesy extended to a future partner, a sign of their eagerness. The suite was, in a word, palatial. It had soaring ceilings, priceless antiques, and a private terrace that offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of Lake Geneva and the Jet d'Eau. A bottle of Dom Pérignon Rosé was chilling in a silver bucket next to a 3-tiered platter of macarons and artisanal cheeses. "Now this is more like it," Chloe purred, dropping her fur coat on a Louis XV armchair. She ran to the terrace, throwing her arms wide. "I could get used to this. Imagine, Julian, our life. Parties here, weekends in Monaco, summers in the Hamptons. Focus, Chloe. I have to prep." Julian loosened his tie, but his eyes were on the champagne. He was already celebrating. "Oh, stop being so boring. You've basically already won," she said, popping the cork. The foam spilled over her hand. She licked it off seductively. "You're a king, Julian, and I'm going to be your queen. That poor, boring little wife of yours. What's her name?" "Amelia." "She probably thinks you're in some stuffy business hotel eating a club sandwich." Julian laughed, taking the glass from her. "She's probably picking out floral arrangements for her sister's sad little party. She has no concept of this world. Her family had money, sure, but they were academic, quiet. All that matters is that she stays in her lane." "And what's my lane?" Chloe asked, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Right here," he murmured, kissing her. "You're my reward." He spent the next few hours in a bubble of supreme confidence. He reviewed his pitch, a masterful presentation, full of bullish projections and strategic synergies. He practiced his answers to the tough questions he imagined this Vance character might ask. He felt sharp, powerful, and virile. Chloe ordered a small mountain of room service, took a bubble bath, and paraded around the suite in new lingerie she'd bought for the trip. As evening fell, they dined at Il Lago, the hotel's Michelin-starred restaurant. Julian spoke loudly about his company, his plans, his inevitable success. Chloe hung on his every word, her eyes sparkling with the reflection of his credit card's limitless potential. They were the perfect picture of new, brash, conquering money. Across the lake, in a different, more discreet wing of the same hotel, Amelia was finishing her own dinner. She was not in the presidential suite. She was in the Redwood suite, a private, unlisted residence reserved for the hotel's most powerful and anonymous guests. Guests who, like her family, had been patrons for generations. She ate a simple meal of grilled fish and vegetables, her table covered not in champagne bottles, but in legal documents. Mr. Harrison, a severe man in his late 50s with the quiet competence of a master chess player, sat opposite her. "The final audit is complete, Miss Vance," Harrison said, sliding a folder across the table. "He did it. He forged your signature on the Park Avenue mortgage agreement. He collateralized it against a bridge loan from a bank in the Cayman Islands. A bank, I might add, that we acquired 3 months ago." Amelia's expression did not change. She opened the folder and read the details. The forgery was clumsy, a desperate man's attempt to copy her flowing signature. "He's arrogant," she said, her voice a low, steady monotone. "He's always believed intelligence is measured in decibels. He thinks because I am quiet, I am stupid. He has also, against his company's bylaws, leveraged the employee pension fund to cover operational shortfalls for this quarter," Harrison added. That made her pause. "The pensions, his father's employees. He is drowning, and he is pulling everyone down with him." Amelia closed the folder. The illusion she had held of the man she married, the brilliant, driven, if sometimes ruthless man, was gone. In his place was a common criminal, a fool and a cheat. "And the other matter?" she asked, not looking up. "The guest," Harrison said, with a slight, distasteful frown. "Chloe Vance. She is with him in the presidential suite. Our staff at the front desk confirmed his check-in. He was loud." "Of course he was," Amelia said. She stood and walked to her own terrace. The view was the same as Julian's, but she saw it differently. He saw a prize. She saw a panorama of her responsibilities. "He brought her to the table," Amelia said, more to herself than to Harrison. "He brought his infidelity, his disrespect, into my world, my family's world." "How do you wish to proceed, Miss Vance?" Harrison asked. "We can have the hotel manager remove her. We can have her escorted to the airport." Amelia was silent for a long time, watching the pinpoint lights of the boats on the dark water. Julian and Chloe were probably back in their suite by now, wrapped up in their shared fantasy, laughing at the boring wife. "No," Amelia said, her voice cutting through the night air. "No, Mr. Harrison. Let her stay. Let her come with him tomorrow." Harrison looked surprised. "To the meeting?" "Miss Vance, that is highly irregular. It's a closed board meeting." "It is my board meeting," Amelia corrected him, turning around. Her eyes were like steel. "He wants to show her his new life? Fine. I want her to have a front row seat for the finale. Make security arrangements. I want her in that room. I want her to see exactly what happens when a man like Julian Thorne mistakes his wife's patience for her permission." The morning of the meeting dawned bright and unforgivingly clear. The sunlight hit the surface of Lake Geneva and shattered into a million sharp, glittering diamonds. In the presidential suite, Julian Thorne was invincible. He had slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a man with no conscience and absolute certainty. He was already dressed in his finest bespoke suit, a navy zenja so dark it was almost black, with a bold, crimson power tie. He looked, he thought, like a man who couldn't possibly lose. He practiced his opening lines in the mirror, his voice resonating with false sincerity and boardroom charm. "Mr. Vance, gentlemen, what Thorne Dynamics represents isn't just logistics. It's the future, a streamlined, aggressive, forward-thinking paradigm." From the bedroom, Chloe emerged, yawning. She was wrapped in one of the hotel's plush bathrobes, her hair a mess. "Julian, are you still talking to yourself? You're going to be late, and my stomach is rumbling. This is the most important presentation of my life, Chloe. It has to be perfect." "It will be perfect," she said. coming up behind him and massaging his shoulders. "You're perfect. Now, I've been thinking." "Oh?" he said, distracted, adjusting a cufflink. "I'm coming with you." Julian froze. He turned to look at her. "What? Don't be ridiculous. This is a closed-door meeting with a $1 trillion investment firm. You can't just—" "Come along." Her face immediately crumpled, the pout emerging. "Why not? You said I was your partner. You said this was the start of our new life. How can it be our life if I'm hiding up in a hotel room like some mistress?" The word hung in the air. "You're not," Julian said quickly, the denial reflexive. "You are. You're my future. But this is business, Chloe. They're old-world Europeans. It's not appropriate." "I think it's very appropriate," she argued, her voice hardening. "I want to see you in action. I want to meet this Mr. Vance. I want him to see the woman who's going to be by your side. It shows strength. It shows you're a modern man, not hiding behind some dowdy wife." Julian hesitated. A part of him, the rational part, screamed that this was a colossally bad idea. But another, larger part, his ego, was intrigued. He imagined walking in not just as a CEO, but as a man who had it all, the money, the power, and the stunning young woman on his arm. It was a projection of total victory. What better way to show this ghost Vance that he was a man of decision and vitality? "You'd have to be silent," he said, the idea taking root. "You'd be an observer, my executive consultant." Chloe's face lit up. "Of course. I'll be brilliant. I'll just sit there and look supportive. Now, what do I wear?" An hour later, they descended to the lobby. Chloe had chosen a vibrant, tight-fitting red dress that was more appropriate for a cocktail party than a 10 a.m. financial meeting. But Julian, blinded by his own arrogance, simply thought she looked spectacular. The Maybach was waiting. "Vanguard headquarters," Julian said to the driver, his voice booming with confidence. "Yes, Mr. Thorne, I know the way." As they pulled into the sleek, modern glass and steel building that served as Vanguard's anonymous European hub, Julian felt a final, glorious surge of adrenaline. This was it. The rest of his life was beginning. At that exact moment, 2 floors above them, Amelia was standing at the head of a long, imposing boardroom table. The room was vast, with one wall of glass overlooking the city and the lake. The other 3 walls were dark, polished mahogany. At the table sat her board, Mr. Harrison, 2 sharp-eyed lawyers, one from Zurich, one from New York, and her chief financial officer. They were all silent, their folders open. Amelia was unrecognizable as the Mrs. Thorne of Park Avenue. She wore a severe, custom-made suit of charcoal grey wool. Her hair was pulled back into a tight, intricate chignon. Her only jewellery was her father's watch and a pair of discreet diamond studs. She looked less like a wife and more like a general preparing for battle. "Security confirms they are in the elevator." "Both of them," Harrison said quietly, checking his tablet. "Good," Amelia said. Her voice was ice. "Miss Vance," the New York lawyer, a man named Bennett, interjected. "Are you absolutely certain about this? Theatrics are unpredictable. We can simply let Mr. Harrison handle the negation. Your presence isn't strictly required for the asset seizure." Amelia looked down the long, empty table. She thought of the forged signature. She thought of the pension funds. She thought of the endless, quiet humiliations, the condescension, the years of being treated like a decorative, brainless object. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice so cold it seemed to lower the temperature in the room. "When a surgeon has to remove a cancer, he does not send his assistant to do it. He cuts it out himself, with precision." She walked to the window, her back to the room, and looked down at the city. He wants to meet A.R. Vance. He wants the power and the money. Well, today he gets his wish. He is going to see exactly who he married, and exactly who he tried to rob. She heard the faint ding of the private elevator arriving in the reception area outside. "Take your seats, gentlemen," Amelia said, turning from the window. She walked to the high-backed leather chair at the head of the table and sat down. Her hands were perfectly steady. She didn't fidget. She didn't check her reflection. She simply waited. The double doors to the boardroom were closed. On the other side, Julian was adjusting his tie one last time. "Ready, darling?" Chloe whispered, clutching his arm. "Born ready," Julian said. A receptionist opened the door. "Mr. Thorne, the board will see you now." Julian put a hand on Chloe's back, smiled his most charming smile, and propelled them both into the room. The first thing that hit Julian was the silence. It was not the expectant hush of a welcoming committee. It was the cold, sterile silence of an operating theatre. The room was long, dark, and dominated by the massive mahogany table. At the far end, silhouetted against the blindingly bright window, sat a figure. Several other figures, all men in dark suits, flanked the table. "Mr. Vance, I presume?" Julian began, striding forward with his hand outstretched, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "Julian Thorne, it is an absolute honor to finally—" He stopped. He was halfway down the table, his hand still in the air, his smile frozen. Chloe, a step behind him, bumped into his back, her high heels clacking on the marble floor. "Oof, Julian, what?" The figure at the head of the table leaned forward slightly, moving out of the direct glare of the window. It was Amelia. Julian's brain simply refused to process the image. It was a system error, a blue screen of the mind. This was impossible. This was a hallucination. Amelia was in Boston. She was at a charity gala. She was Amelia. She was not here, in this suit, at the head of this table, staring at him with eyes he had never seen before, eyes as flat and cold as glacial ice. "Amelia?" The name came out as a strangled whisper. What are you doing here? How did you— Is this a joke?" Chloe, peering around his shoulder, let out a confused, nervous laugh. "Amelia? Oh my God, Julian, is this your wife? What is she like, the secretary? Honey, can you get us some coffee? 2, please. Black for him. Extra sweet latte for me." No one moved. No one spoke. The men at the table, Harrison, Bennett, the others, looked at Chloe as if she were a piece of lint, then immediately dismissed her. Their focus was entirely on the 2 people at the ends of the table. Amelia looked past Julian, her gaze landing on Chloe for one dismissive second. She did not acknowledge the coffee order. She did not acknowledge Chloe's presence. Instead, she looked directly at her husband. "Mr. Thorne," she said, and the voice that came out was not the voice of his wife. It was a crisp, clear, boardroom contralto, amplified slightly by the room's acoustics. It was a voice of absolute, unquestioned authority. "Please take a seat. You too, Miss Vance. I believe you requested to be here." The use of her name hit Chloe like a slap. "How do you know my name?" Julian, his face draining of all color, finally found his legs. He stumbled into the chair opposite Harrison. "Amelia, explain this. Now." "Explanation?" Amelia raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I believe you are the one here to present a proposal, Mr. Thorne. You requested a meeting with Vanguard Equity Partners. You are now at that meeting." "But you're—" Julian's mind was still catching up. He looked at the plaque on the table in front of her. It was small, discreet, and made of brushed steel. It read, A.R. Vance, Principal. His blood ran cold. A.R. Vance, Amelia, Redwood, Vance. He said the name, his own wife's full maiden name, as if for the first time, the name he had never bothered to connect to the investment firm he was chasing. "Oh, Julian," Chloe said, her voice now high and brittle. "Is this some kind of setup? Did your wife follow you?" "Silence," Mr. Harrison said, his voice quiet but absolute. "This is a board meeting." "Julian, this is absurd," Amelia continued, ignoring the interruption. "You came all this way. You brought your consultant. Please begin your presentation. We are all very eager to hear about the streamlined, aggressive, forward-thinking paradigm you're proposing." She had quoted his words from the mirror. He realized with dawning, sickening horror that the suite was bugged. The hotel, the car, they had been listening. Julian's face, which had been pale, now flushed a dark, mottled red. The shock was turning to rage. This was a humiliation, a setup. "You did this," he hissed. "You set me up. This entire thing, the meeting, the Vance mystery. It was you. All you." "I did nothing, Julian," Amelia said calmly. "You are the CEO of Thorn Dynamics. You are the one who ran it into the ground. You are the one who chased my firm for a bailout. And you are the one who chose to bring your intern to the meeting. I simply arranged the seating." You bitch!" Julian spat, rising from his chair. "Sit down, Mr. Thorn," Mr. Bennett, the lawyer, snapped, "or security will assist you." Two large, uniformed security guards, previously unnoticed, materialized from a recess near the door. Julian, shaking, slowly sat. He looked at the men at the table. They were not looking at him with pity or even anger. They were looking at him with contempt. "Now," Amelia said, opening the sleek folder in front of her. "Let's dispense with your presentation. We've already read it. And frankly, the fiction section at the airport bookshop is more believable." She pressed a button on the console in front of her. The large wall behind her, which had looked like dark wood, lit up. It was a massive digital display. On it was a single document, the balance sheet for Thorn Dynamics, the real one. "This," Amelia said, "is your company, not the fantasy you've been shopping around. Let's start with the $80 million operational shortfall you've been hiding by leveraging your employee pension fund. An act, I might add, which is highly illegal." Julian's breath hitched. He had buried that. No one could have known. "Or," Amelia continued, swiping to the next slide, "we could discuss the series of bridge loans you've taken out, specifically this one, from a small boutique bank in the Cayman Islands." The next slide showed a document, a mortgage agreement. "That," Amelia said, "is the deed to our Park Avenue apartment, an asset which I own 50% of outright as per our prenuptial agreement, an asset you leveraged without my knowledge." She zoomed in. The signature Amelia R. Thorn was visible. It was a shaky, unconvincing scrawl. "And that," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "is a felony, Julian. A very, very clumsy forgery." The room was utterly silent. Julian was no longer breathing. He was just existing. A statue of a man, his arrogance and confidence shattered into dust. It was Chloe who finally broke the silence. A prenup?" she whispered, her eyes wide with terror, staring at Julian. "You told me there was no prenup. You told me her family money was all tied up in trusts. You said half of everything was yours." Julian couldn't speak. Amelia looked at the horrified young woman. For the first time, a flicker of something, not pity, but perhaps weary understanding, crossed her face. "He lied, Ms. Vance," Amelia said simply. "He lies about everything. That is his nature." Now let's move on to the terms of my decision." Julian stared at the screen, at the digital copy of his forged signature, at the red-flagged numbers of the pension fund. The complex, invincible fortress of his life, built on charm and risk and deceit, had just been leveled by a single, quiet detonation. And the demolitions expert was his wife. "Amelia, please," he managed, his voice hoarse. The rage was gone, replaced by a desperate, pathetic pleading. "Listen to me. We can fix this. It's just creative accounting. Every big company does it. I was trying to protect us, to protect you." Amelia actually laughed. It was not a sound Julian had ever heard from her. It was short, sharp, and utterly devoid of humor. "Protect me?" she repeated, disbelief coloring her icy tone. "You were protecting me when you leveraged my home? Were you protecting me when you stole from your employees, the people who trusted your father for 30 years? Or," and here her eyes flickered to Chloe, who looked as if she were about to be physically sick, "were you protecting me when you booked this trip, using company funds to fly your mistress to Geneva in a G550? The color drained from Chloe's face. "Company funds? You said it was your jet." "Julian doesn't own a jet, Ms. Vance," Mr. Harrison interjected, his voice dripping with disdain. "He charters it, and he's 3 months behind on his payments to NetJets. We know. We bought the debt." This new piece of information hit Julian like another physical blow. You bought my debt?" "We own all of your debt, Julian," Amelia said, standing up. She began to pace slowly in front of the window, a predator outlining the borders of her cage. "For the last 6 months, while you've been distracted, Vanguard has been quietly acquiring every piece of Thorn Dynamics' outstanding debt. The loan from the Caymans? That was us. The bonds you issued last quarter? Us. The lease on your corporate headquarters in Manhattan? We are your new landlord. You haven't been trying to get a meeting with a new investor, Julian. You've been unknowingly corresponding with your single largest creditor." Julian's world tilted. He wasn't here for a lifeline. He had been summoned for an execution. You can't," he stammered. "Why? Why would you do this? We're married." "Yes," Amelia said, stopping directly in front of him. She leaned down, placing her hands flat on the gleaming table. She was close enough that he could smell her perfume. It wasn't the light, floral scent she wore at home. This was something dark, expensive, and smoky. "We are married, and as your wife, I had a front row seat. I watched you become this hollow man, arrogant, dismissive, and sloppy. You thought I was a fool, Julian, a decoration. You thought I was just Amelia, the woman who hosts charities and picks out furniture." She turned and addressed the room. "But my father, Arthur Redwood Vance, did not raise a fool. He raised his successor. When he died, he left me in control of this firm. A firm you saw as a target, never once connecting it to the woman sleeping in your bed." She walked back to her chair. "So no, Mr. Thorne, Vanguard will not be investing $300 million to save your company. We will be calling in the $500 million in debt you already owe us, effective immediately." "No!" Julian shouted, leaping to his feet again. "You can't! That will bankrupt me. It will trigger every other clause. I'll be ruined." "You are already ruined, Julian," Amelia said flatly. "You did this to yourself." "But what about you?" he cried, grasping at straws. "Our assets, the prenup. Even with the prenup, you'll lose. The press. It will be a scandal." "Ah, the prenup," Mr. Bennett, the lawyer, said, finally speaking up. He slid a thick, leather-bound document across the table. "I have it right here. I drafted it myself, 12 years ago, at Mr. Redwood Vance's request. It's quite ironclad. It protects all of Ms. Vance's assets, all of Vanguard, and all inherited properties. But you are correct, Mr. Thorne. Your shared assets would normally be split." Julian nodded, a wild, desperate hope in his eyes. Yes, see? The apartment. The art. However, Bennett continued, if you'd kindly turn to page 14, section 8b, the infidelity clause. Julian's blood turned to ice. "An infidelity clause?" Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking. "You signed an infidelity clause?" "It's very specific," Bennett said, clearly enjoying himself. "It states that in the event of proven marital infidelity on Mr. Thorne's part, he forfeits any and all claim to shared assets, including but not limited to real estate, art, and liquid accounts. All claims revert to Miss Vance." "Proven?" Julian spat. "You can't prove anything." Amelia sighed. "Julian, please don't make this any more pathetic than it already is. Mr. Harrison." Harrison tapped a key. The main screen lit up again. This time it wasn't spreadsheets. It was a photograph. Julian and Chloe kissing outside a restaurant in Soho. Date stamped. The next slide, Julian and Chloe entering a hotel. The next, a clear shot of them on the tarmac at Teterboro, just yesterday. The next, a still from the security camera inside the elevator of the Four Seasons, showing them in a passionate embrace. Chloe let out a small, strangled sob and covered her mouth. "And that," Amelia said, as the screen went black, "is before we even get to the forgery, the pension fraud, and the embezzlement of company funds to pay for this." She gestured vaguely at Chloe. "You are not just facing a divorce, Julian. You are facing the SEC, the Department of Labor, and the District Attorney of New York. You're not just losing your company, you're losing your freedom." Julian Thorne collapsed into his chair. It wasn't a slow sinking. It was a gravitational failure. The strings holding him up had been cut. He stared at the polished table, his reflection staring back, a broken, terrified, middle-aged man. He was finished, utterly and completely. "Now," Amelia said, her voice brisk, "Mr. Harrison will present you with two options. Option A, you sign these documents, transferring your remaining shares in Thorne Dynamics and your signatory power over to us immediately. You also sign these divorce papers, which cite irreconcilable differences, and you agree to the terms of the prenup. You walk out of here with nothing, literally nothing. But if you do that, Vanguard may choose to restructure the pension fund and make your employees whole, and we may choose to handle the forgery and embezzlement as an internal matter." "And option B," Julian whispered, his lips barely moving. "Option B," Amelia said, standing up. "You refuse, and I call the police. Right now. The choice is yours. You have 5 minutes." Amelia walked to the door, followed by her CFO. She paused, her hand on the handle. "Oh, and Julian." He looked up, his eyes vacant and dead. "The presidential suite was booked on my account, as was your jet. Your credit cards were all frozen an hour ago. So, however this ends, you'll need to find your own way home." She swept out of the room, leaving him alone with the lawyers, the security guards, and the weeping girl in the red dress. The heavy boardroom door clicked shut, and the silence that descended was heavier and more suffocating than before. Julian sat, unmoving, staring at the stack of documents Mr. Harrison had pushed in front of him. It was his entire life, condensed into 100 pages of surrender. Chloe was the first to move. Her sobs, which had been hysterical, sharpened into a shrill, panicked anger. "You!" she shrieked, standing up and pointing a trembling finger at Julian. "You idiot! You ruined me! You told me you were powerful! You told me you were rich! You swore to me you were leaving her! That I was going to be the new Mrs. Thorne!" Julian didn't even look at her. He was a hollowed-out shell. An infidelity clause? Pension fraud? Chloe was backing away toward the door, her eyes wide with the realization that she was tied to a sinking ship. No, a submarine that had already imploded. "You're a criminal. You lied to me. I'm a witness." "Miss Vance," Mr. Bennet said, his voice bored, "you are free to go. I'd advise you to find your own legal counsel, and as your credit cards are secondary to Mr. Thorne's accounts, I'd imagine they are also no longer functional." That hit her. My cards? I can't. How am I supposed to get back to New York?" "That is not our concern," Harrison said, tapping his pen. "Mr. Thorne, the clock is ticking." Chloe looked at Julian, her face a mask of pure, undiluted hatred. "I hate you, Julian Thorne. You're pathetic." She grabbed her purse, yanked open the boardroom door, and ran out, her heels echoing down the marble hallway. She was gone. The reward, the future, the queen, evaporated at the first sign of actual trouble. Now, it was just Julian. He was alone with the men who were here to dismantle him. He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so violently he could barely hold it. He thought of his father, the man who had built Thorne Dynamics from a single truck. He thought of the arrogance with which he had dismissed Amelia for 12 years, the sheer, blinding hubris. He had seen her as a soft, passive, background element to his dynamic life. He never realized he was just a noisy, temporary character in her story. She hadn't just checkmated him. She had revealed he was playing checkers while she was playing three-dimensional chess, a game she had already won before he even sat down. He signed the first page. The divorce settlement. He signed the next. The transfer of shares. He signed the next. The forfeiture of assets. Each signature felt like a pint of blood leaving his body. When he was done, he pushed the stack back. He was nothing. A man with a designer suit he no longer owned, and a watch he would have to sell. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Thorne," Harrison said, professionally gathering the documents. "A car is waiting downstairs to take you to the airport. It will take you to the commercial terminal. We've booked you a one-way ticket, economy class, on Swiss Air, connecting through JFK. It leaves in 3 hours. Do not miss it." Julian stood up. His legs felt like lead. The security guards moved toward him. "I can walk," he muttered. He walked out of the boardroom. He didn't look back. The receptionist in the lobby didn't look up from her screen. He rode the elevator down, the mirrored walls showing him a stranger, a pale, defeated, terrified man. The illusion was gone, and the reality was unbearable. He stepped out of the sleek glass building into the bright Geneva sunlight. It felt like an assault. The waiting car was not a Maybach. It was a simple, dark sedan. He got in the back. As the car pulled away, he looked back at the Vanguard building, a monument to the power he had tried to swindle and lost. Upstairs in the Redwood suite, Amelia stood on her private terrace, a cup of tea in her hands. She watched the small sedan pull into traffic and disappear. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel joy. She felt a profound, hollowing relief. The cancer had been excised. It was over. Mr. Harrison entered the suite. "It is done, Miss Vance. He signed everything. The assets are secure. The SEC notification will be filed by our legal team within the hour, framing it as an internal restructuring and ousting of corrupt management. We will make the pension fund whole by tomorrow. The Thorne Dynamics brand is dead. We will rebrand the viable assets as Vanguard Logistics. And Mr. Thorne? He is on his way to the commercial airport. He will land in New York with nothing but the clothes on his back." "Good," Amelia said. She took a sip of her tea. "And Miss Vance?" Harrison permitted himself a small, dry smile. She was last seen at the concierge desk, attempting to sell her watch. Apparently, Patek Philippe has a strict no-buyback policy. She was irate. Amelia nodded, a small, messy loose end. Have our security team escort her to the airport as well. Buy her a one-way ticket to New York, in coach. See that she gets on the plane. Then she's no longer our concern. Very good, Miss Vance. Harrison paused. And you? Amelia looked out at the jet d'eau, a powerful, defiant plume of water shooting into the sky. She felt like that water. For 12 years she had been held down, compressed, and contained. Now she was free. The Amelia Thorne identity was gone, dissolved along with her sham of a marriage. I am going to stay in Geneva for the week, said Amelia Redwood Vance. I have a company to run. The story of Julian Thorne is a brutal reminder that the most dangerous person is the one you underestimate. He saw his wife as a quiet accessory to his life, not as the architect of his downfall. He built his empire on ego and deceit, forgetting that true power, real power, doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to show off in a flashy jet or a red dress. Real power is patient, it's intelligent, and it waits for the perfect moment to strike. Julian lost everything, not because he was caught, but because he was arrogant enough to believe he was the smartest person in the room, never realizing he wasn't even on the guest list. What do you think? Was Amelia's revenge justified? Or was it a cold, calculated destruction? Could Julian ever have been redeemed? Or was he a victim of his own incurable arrogance? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. This story was a wild one. And if you enjoyed this journey into drama and sweet, sweet revenge, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good story, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more tales of secrets, lies, and the powerful truths that always come to light. Thank you for listening.
Pregnant wife was trapped in a basement. Mistress laughed until the millionaire discovered her plan. Trapped in the dark with only the echo of her own heartbeat, Lila Carter could hardly believe her predicament. Once cherished as the glowing wife of a powerful millionaire, she now found herself captive in a cold, windowless basement, pregnant and terrified. Far above, Scarlett Delgado, the cunning mistress, celebrated her twisted success with a triumphant smirk. She thought she had everything under control, Lila out of the way and Marcus Carter dancing to her tune. But secrets have a way of surfacing at the worst of times, and Marcus was far cleverer than Scarlett realized. Little did she know, her carefully woven plan was about to unravel. It all began on a crisp autumn evening in New York City, a night that exuded glamour and excitement. Socialites arrived in limousines, stepping onto a lush red carpet leading into the iconic Park Lane Hotel. The occasion was the annual Carter Foundation Charity Gala, where the city's elite gathered to raise funds for underprivileged communities. Marcus Carter, the young millionaire and visionary philanthropist, was poised to make a memorable speech. Lila Carter, his wife, floated gracefully by his side. Radiant in a flowing midnight blue gown, she greeted donors and friends with warm smiles. She was known for her elegant poise and genuine compassion. While many wealthy spouses simply enjoyed the spotlight, Lila had always been hands-on in her charitable efforts. She and Marcus had met years earlier at a fundraiser for the homeless. He was then merely a man brimming with ambition, but not yet the legendary figure he would soon become. From their very first conversation, they bonded over a shared vision to use their resources for meaningful change in the world. At that gala, the couple announced new education and health initiatives for struggling families in the outskirts of Newark. Cameras flashed, capturing glimpses of philanthropic royalty at work. Paparazzi drones buzzed in the sky, searching for that perfect photo of the handsome couple who seemed to exemplify marital bliss. On the surface, everything appeared flawless, a power couple beloved for their generosity and unwavering devotion to each other. Yet, behind the scenes, murmurings hinted at cracks beneath the polished veneer. Those close to Lila noticed the slightest slump in her shoulders and the forced brightness in her eyes. After the cameras turned away, Marcus, consumed by the demands of his expanding empire, seemed more distant lately. He traveled frequently, forging new business ties and forging countless deals behind tall glass skyscrapers. It was in these glittering boardrooms and private jets where new alliances, some beneficial, others dangerous, would form. Lila could not quite pinpoint the reason for the tension brewing in their once harmonious marriage. She longed to pull him aside, wrap her arms around him, and ask if everything was truly all right. Each time she mustered the courage, a new distraction, phone calls, emails, staff inquiries pulled him away. The promise of "I'll tell you everything tonight, darling," never came to pass, drowned out by work and social obligations. Lila's best friend, Jasmine Moore, had gently probed, asking if she felt overshadowed. "No," Lila had replied, "just worried." In the swirling crowd of that night's grand gala, a striking woman in a crimson gown stood near the bar, swirling a sparkling drink in her hand. She kept her gaze firmly on Marcus, occasionally letting her sultry eyes sweep over to Lila. Anyone observing her face would detect a curious mix of admiration and envy. Her name was Scarlett Delgado, a new benefactor who had rapidly become a fixture among New York's elite. Though she claimed to be an heiress from an old-money Houston family, no one could precisely recall meeting her parents or hearing her name in philanthropic circles before. Despite this, she donated generously at every event, discreetly paying her way into the high society scene. At that moment, few would guess the ominous role Scarlett would play in the Carter household. She had carefully orchestrated her appearance and used substantial sums of money to slip past the watchful eyes of investigators who typically verified the backgrounds of donors. Though the glamorous evening was overshadowed by the grand scope of the Carter Foundation's philanthropic announcements, Scarlett's cunning presence was a ticking bomb waiting to explode. In the days following the gala, Lila attempted to reignite the intimacy that had once defined her relationship with Marcus. She arranged a candlelit dinner in their penthouse, complete with his favorite jazz melodies from her carefully curated playlist. But the moment he walked through the door, phone still glued to his ear, Lila knew that her best-laid plans were at risk. He apologized briefly, eyes filled with exhaustion, and retreated to his office the moment his call ended. Days turned into weeks. Marcus grew more irritable, vexed by problems with one of his real estate ventures in Europe. Lila found herself tiptoeing around his moods, setting aside her own concerns for fear of adding to his burden. Even the staff in the Carter household noticed that something was amiss. James, their loyal butler, often paused when delivering tea or mail, glancing at Lila with a worried expression. Unknown to Lila, during one of Marcus's business trips to London, Scarlett Delgado had been there as well. She had carefully studied his itinerary, ensuring that they crossed paths in exclusive hotel lounges or were introduced by powerful mutual acquaintances. She was tactful, never pushing herself too visibly upon him at first. She played the role of the sympathetic confidant, a woman with apparently endless resources, knowledge of international markets, and a wry sense of humor that caught Marcus off guard. The flirtation became a welcome distraction for Marcus, who was weighed down by corporate conflicts and a gnawing feeling that he was neglecting his marriage. He hadn't intended to let it escalate beyond casual conversation, but Scarlett was skilled at reading vulnerabilities. She asked about his day, sympathized with his challenges, and somehow made him laugh in a way he hadn't laughed in months. Before long, text messages and late-night calls became the norm. Back in New York, Lila felt a growing distance in Marcus's tone whenever they spoke. The phone calls from London were tinged with tired courtesy, like a man fulfilling an obligation rather than sharing his life with the woman he adored. Yet, for all her intuition, Lila never once suspected that a third party might be involved. She assumed it was the strain of business expansions or the pressure of philanthropic endeavors. One weekend, Marcus returned from a grueling trip. Lila was about to rush to greet him at the door, heart brimming with relief that he was finally home, when she noticed that the lines of worry on his face had smoothed somewhat. There was a peculiar lightness in his expression, almost as though he'd discovered a new source of energy. Lila hesitated, something inside her cautioning that this transformation was not entirely positive. He quickly left again that evening for a dinner meeting. To Lila's dismay, she later saw a photograph circulating online, Marcus stepping out of a private dining club with Scarlett Delgado discreetly at his side. The caption read, "Marcus Carter spotted with new philanthropic partner, the elusive Scarlett Delgado." To the outside world, the image was innocent enough, two donors discussing a cause. But to Lila, it struck deep. She recognized the flush of excitement on her husband's cheeks, a familiarity in his body language that set off alarms in her mind. She confided in her friend Jasmine, who gently reminded her that the media loved to spark rumors. Maybe it was nothing. Yet Lila could not rid herself of a nagging sense that, for Marcus, Scarlett Delgado was quickly becoming more than a business connection. Lila's heart sank. She recalled a conversation she once had with Linda Carter, Marcus's mother, a vibrant woman who passed away 3 years ago. Linda had warned, "Never let the public's illusions trick you into ignoring your instincts. If you feel something is wrong, it probably is." Despite her rising suspicions, Lila resolved to remain calm and gather facts. She refused to confront Marcus without proof, clinging to the hope that there might be an innocent explanation. Meanwhile, Scarlett's name surfaced more frequently. She was at every event, often singled out by reporters praising her philanthropic contributions and close cooperation with the Carter Foundation. While Lila didn't want to leap to conclusions, the storm clouds were gathering overhead, and her heart sensed a brewing catastrophe. Amid her emotional turmoil, Lila experienced something miraculous. She discovered she was pregnant. One morning, she felt an inexplicable wave of nausea that lingered too long. She hurried to the private physician recommended by Dr. Emily Parker, a longtime friend of the Carters, to confirm her suspicions. When the test results came back positive, Lila's hand quivered so violently that she dropped the folder. Joy and trepidation battled for dominance in her heart. She had dreamed of having a child with Marcus for years, and they had once spoken of raising a big family, brimming with laughter and love. But this pregnancy also filled her with anxiety, given the growing tension between them. That evening, Lila prepared a small gift box containing a baby rattle and a note, "You're going to be a father." She set it on the marble kitchen counter, rehearsing in her mind how she would deliver the news. When Marcus stepped into the penthouse, his phone, as usual, was glued to his ear. He gave Lila a distracted kiss on the cheek and disappeared into his study. Lila followed him, building her courage. After what felt like an eternity, she finally got him to sit on the couch, turned off his phone, and handed him the box. Marcus opened it, eyes widening at the rattle. For a moment, no words came. Then a mix of emotions spread across his face, first surprise, then delight, then a fleeting shadow of guilt, as though he remembered something or someone who complicated his feelings. Eventually a broad grin emerged. He lifted Lila in his arms, kissing her with a tenderness she had not felt in months. They spent that night discussing baby names, future nursery plans, and even rummaging through old family photo albums for inspiration. Lila's tears of joy came freely, and Marcus stroked her hair, whispering, "I'm sorry if I've been distant. Let's put all that behind us, my love. This baby is our fresh start." Deep in her heart, Lila clung to this promise of renewal. She believed that their child would unite them again and fortify their marriage against the rumors, the mistrust, and the cunning smiles of onlookers like Scarlett Delgado. But she didn't see the text message that flickered on Marcus's phone late that night while he slept. "Missing you desperately." From a number labeled SD, days flew by, becoming a whirlwind of baby preparations and philanthropic duties. Lila threw herself into the Foundation's projects, wanting to celebrate her pregnancy by helping others in need. She began drafting a new scholarship program targeted at expecting mothers who lacked support, hoping it might improve healthcare and child-rearing resources in impoverished regions. She found solace in this work, believing it was an extension of the love she already felt for her unborn child. Marcus, however, seemed torn between excitement and something else, an unspoken burden that gnawed at him. He maintained his business trips and late-night calls, though he tried harder to be present. Yet, when Lila pressed her ear to his chest, she sensed a disquiet within him. Late one night, she overheard a sliver of conversation between Marcus and James the butler. James had found an earring in the back of one of the Carter limousines after Marcus's return from a meeting. It certainly did not belong to Lila. James discreetly handed it over with an unreadable expression, and Marcus quickly pocketed it. Lila pretended to be asleep on the living room couch, but her mind was far from restful. Scarlett Delgado's image glimmered in her thoughts. Though she prayed she was wrong, the earring was a silent piece of evidence that chipped away at her hope. As the weeks passed, Lila's pregnancy progressed, bringing her both physical changes and emotional fragility. She tried to broach the subject of fidelity, but each time Marcus seemed overwhelmed. He promised his love and devotion, dodging direct accusations. She would watch him, searching for sincerity in his eyes, often swayed into believing him, for her heart desperately wanted to trust him. Meanwhile, Scarlett Delgado grew bolder. She made not-so-subtle appearances in places frequented by Lila boutiques, the salon, even once showing up at the same prenatal yoga class. She never spoke more than a few words, but her presence felt like a provocation, a silent message that Lila's life was under scrutiny. Scarlett's eyes gleamed with a triumphant spark, especially as Lila's belly began to show. Even at glamorous events, Scarlett would glance at Lila from across the room, lips curling into a cryptic smile. Friends whispered to Lila that Scarlett's philanthropic donations continued to rise, ingratiating her further into the social circles once dominated by the Carters. Scarlett wined and dined prominent officials, invited them to her newly purchased mansion in the Hamptons, and even showcased her rumored ties to aristocracy in Europe. She was weaving a wide net of influence, capturing hearts and minds, though few suspected the venom that fueled her actions behind closed doors. Unbeknownst to Lila, Scarlett's plan was far darker than a mere affair. She had studied Marcus's vulnerabilities, recognized the fortress of Lila's unwavering reputation, and decided that removing Lila permanently was the only way to secure her hold on Marcus and his empire. Scarlett Delgado's plan did not spring into being overnight. It was an intricate tapestry woven from subtle manipulation and carefully timed deception's threads that would all converge in a single, devastating trap. Lila, unaware of the forces aligning against her, could only sense an ever-tightening grip around her marriage and her sense of safety. Soon she would find herself alone, caught in a scheme so twisted that escape seemed impossible. Scarlett began by sowing seeds of misdirection throughout Marcus Carter's social circles. She was aware that the Carter name carried prestige and that any whisper or rumor no matter how small, spread swiftly among the city's upper echelons. To orchestrate this, she employed a strategic combination of money, charm, and underhanded tactics. She donated enormous sums to key influencers, society bloggers, public relations professionals, even small tabloid reporters who thrived on sensational stories. These payouts guaranteed that Scarlett had a loyal cadre of enablers ready to twist the narrative in her favor whenever she required it. Scarlett's first move was to deepen her presence within the Carter Foundation. On paper, she appeared to be a model philanthropist, attending events, signing large checks, and frequently volunteering for the Foundation's charitable causes. She made a point of personally showing up at orphanages and women's shelters that Lila had long supported, even bringing gifts or offering to fund renovations. Local news outlets ran glowing features about this mysterious yet magnanimous heiress from Texas, praising the synergy between her money and Marcus Carter's philanthropic vision. The public image was so positive that only the keenest observers would suspect something was amiss. Yet behind closed doors, Scarlett was busy fomenting discord. She hired private investigators under false company names, people adept at working in the shadows. They trailed Lila to her doctor's appointments, to the foundation offices, and even when she met friends for lunch. They recorded mundane details: when she smiled, when she frowned, whom she spoke to, how long she stayed in each meeting. Scarlett dissected these observations meticulously, seeking any angle she could exploit to suggest that Lila was hiding secrets or worse, being unfaithful. Society's rumor mill is famously voracious. It thrives on half-truths, innuendo, and the thrill of scandal among the elite. Scarlett took advantage of this by planting small lies whispered among those known for their loose tongues. She made insinuations that Lila seemed suspiciously close to a certain male foundation director, or that Lila's extended visits to the philanthropic headquarters were, in fact, secret trysts. She peppered her stories with just enough plausible details, like the fact that Lila regularly worked late hours at the foundation, to make them credible. Soon, these falsehoods circulated among society's dinner parties and charity luncheons, morphing with each retelling. Marcus, though initially dismissive of gossip, couldn't help but register the repeated mentions of Lila's alleged dalliances. He told himself it was absurd to even consider Lila unfaithful. She was the same woman who had shown him unconditional love for years. Yet Scarlett was there at his side at opportune moments, subtly reinforcing the rumors. With a sympathetic tilt of her head, she would say, "Marcus, the first sure she's innocent, but you know how people talk. Sometimes it's worth confronting these rumors head-on, just in case." Her gentle, almost maternal show of concern had a psychological effect on Marcus. Over time, he began to wonder if there was a tiny grain of truth to what everyone else seemed to be whispering. When he caught glimpses of Lila looking distraught, he questioned whether she felt guilty about something rather than simply overwhelmed by pregnancy hormones. Without realizing it, he was slipping further under Scarlett's spell. Simultaneously, Scarlett set out to isolate Lila from her network of friends and colleagues. She had her private investigators feed orchestrated tips to anyone who might have aided Lila in the event of a crisis. A board member at the Carter Foundation, a longtime ally of Lila's, suddenly began receiving messages that implied Lila mismanaged funds again. Pure fiction, but enough to seed doubts. A caterer once close to Lila got an anonymous phone call claiming she was about to be fired because of Lila's alleged new mistress demands. The real aim was to ensure that if Lila ever went to these people for help, they might question her credibility. Scarlett understood that isolating the target was the fastest way to make her vulnerable. She also made sure to personally befriend Lila's acquaintances, flashing her veneer of generosity so they might second-guess any future accusations. Lila made against her. One handshake, one charitable donation at a time, she eroded Lila's social pillars of support. Scarlett's most audacious move was the purchase of a derelict property on the outskirts of Westchester County. She funneled money through a shell corporation, Nightingale Holdings, ensuring no direct paper trail connected her name to the estate. The property itself was a sprawling but crumbling mansion with boarded windows and a cavernous basement that had once been used for storage. To the untrained eye, it was worthless real estate, a burdensome fixer-upper that no legitimate buyer would touch. But for Scarlett, it was an ideal hideaway secluded, off the main roads, and large enough to house a captive without drawing suspicion. With a few well-placed bribes to local inspectors, any oversight or visits from authorities were conveniently delayed. She had the heavy basement door reinforced and installed additional locks to ensure no one could easily break free. It was in that basement, harshly lit by a single hanging bulb, that Scarlett envisioned the climax of her plan: Lila, pregnant and powerless, trapped far from Marcus's protection. As Scarlett tightened her net, Lila felt the tremors of unease intensify each day. She noticed the strange looks from Foundation colleagues, once familiar faces now guarded or even suspicious. Friends seemed distant, and whispered conversations halted whenever she approached. Worst of all, Marcus began questioning her about the most routine parts of her day. He'd ask which doctors she visited or how many calls she took at the office, and each time there was a slight tremor in his voice, as though bracing for bad news. Lila, overwhelmed by the changes in her body and the emotional burden of a husband who seemed increasingly distant, found it difficult to articulate her frustrations. She feared confrontation might further stress Marcus, especially now that their baby was on the way. Privately, she resolved to gather more concrete evidence about Scarlett's involvement before leveling any accusations. After all, who would believe her if she simply pointed at a philanthropic angel like Scarlett Delgado? Scarlett's machinations grew bolder when she learned of Marcus's upcoming business trip to Singapore. His departure presented a golden window of opportunity. If Lila could be taken out of the picture while Marcus was abroad, Scarlett would have extra time to manipulate the narrative, sending text messages from Lila's phone, forging notes, or even staging evidence to suggest Lila had left of her own accord due to marital strife. Scarlett recruited 2 of the private investigators she trusted most to handle the risky operation. Each man had a shady past. One had done time for extortion, while the other was rumored to have ties to a criminal syndicate in Chicago. They were expensive, but Scarlett had the funds to match her ambitions, and she made it clear that failure was not an option. For weeks, they stalked Lila's habits, pinpointing the perfect moment to strike, a day when Marcus had already left, and Lila had no pressing appointments that might alert others to her absence. They set it in motion by placing a call from a burner phone, using a pseudonym to claim an urgent medical situation in Westchester. They knew Lila cared deeply about her circle of friends and contacts in the philanthropic world. If someone was in dire trouble, it would be natural for her to rush to their aid. On the chosen day, Lila stepped out of her meeting at a small Manhattan cafe. Her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. The frantic voice on the other end, masked by a stolen identity, pleaded for her help, insisting there was no time to explain. Without a second thought, Lila hailed a cab, unsettled but eager to assist. She instructed the driver to head to the address provided, still uncertain whom she might be saving. As the city's familiar skyline gave way to lonely roads flanked by skeletal trees, her unease solidified into dread. Scarlett, meanwhile, watched from afar, a discreet smile playing on her lips. She knew every detail was poised to fall into place. Lila, vulnerable and alone. Marcus, thousands of miles away. The final location, a remote estate with no prying neighbors. The men had their orders, and Scarlett had booked her own flight out of the country the following day, should circumstances become critical. By the time Lila realized the hospital in Westchester was a deserted, run-down mansion, it was too late. Two men emerged from the shadows, overpowering her with cruel efficiency. Her cry for help died in her throat as a gag was forced over her mouth, and rough hands dragged her into the building's bowels. In minutes, she found herself bound to a chair in the dark, damp recesses of the basement. Every muscle frozen in terror, Scarlett stepped into the flickering light, triumphant. The trap she had spent months crafting had finally sprung shut on Lila Carter. Only time would tell whether Marcus would reach her in time to save not only Lila's life, but also their unborn child's. Yet in Scarlett's mind, the final outcome seemed certain. She believed she held all the cards, a carefully rehearsed web of lies, a compromised millionaire, and a soon-to-be missing wife who would conveniently vanish from the public eye. The stage was set, and for Lila, bound, trembling, and pregnant, the true nightmare was only just beginning. Lila found herself at a small cafe in Manhattan one morning, meeting with a local charity volunteer. She sipped her herbal tea, going over event plans with quiet enthusiasm. Unnoticed at a nearby table sat a man who carefully watched her every move. He was one of the private investigators in Scarlett's employ. He covertly relayed Lila's location to Scarlett, who then made her own preparations. Shortly after leaving the cafe, Lila received a phone call from an unknown number. The frantic voice on the other end introduced himself as Dr. Bernstein from Westchester County Hospital. He claimed there had been an accident involving someone close to her, and she needed to come right away. Distressed and unthinking, Lila rushed to hail a cab. She questioned the authenticity of the call, only briefly who would be in Westchester and who might have used her name as an emergency contact. But fear and concern for her unborn baby's well-being overshadowed her misgivings. The journey took nearly an hour. The cab turned onto a secluded road. The driver, who had been paid off, insisted he was following the address provided. Tall, leafless trees lined the path, stark against the grey winter sky. Lila's heart pounded as they pulled up to a large, dilapidated house that clearly was no hospital. Alarmed, she asked the driver what was going on, but he avoided her gaze. He mumbled something about receiving instructions to drop her off there. Before Lila could react, two men emerged from the shadows of the property. They approached the car swiftly. The driver unlocked the back door, and before Lila could scramble to the opposite side, rough hands seized her. She let out a frightened scream, only to be gagged with a cloth. She was rushed inside the estate, her pregnant belly making it impossible to fight effectively. Fear clutched her heart with every step. Questions raced through her mind. Who were these men? Why would they want to harm her? They dragged her down into the basement, a large, musty space with a single light bulb dangling overhead. The air smelled of damp concrete and mold. There, the men bound her wrists and ankles to a wooden chair. One of them placed a piece of tape over her mouth, muffling her panicked attempts to speak. Through terror-widened eyes, she saw a figure emerge from the shadows, Scarlett Delgado. Dressed immaculately in a tailored coat, Scarlett glided across the filthy floor as though she were on a catwalk. Her bright red lips curled into a victorious sneer. "You poor thing," Scarlett purred, wrenching off the tape. "You look absolutely frightened." Lila coughed, choking on tears and the stale air. "Why are you doing this?" she managed, voice trembling with both fear and fury. Scarlett gave a light laugh. "Because you have something I want, darling. And, unfortunately, your presence has become problematic." Lila's mind reeled. Everything clicked. The rumors, The suspicious earring, the tension with Marcus Scarlett Delgado was behind it all. Scarlett circled Lila like a predatory cat. You see, your dear husband is quite the catch, powerful, influential. But, oh, so naive in some ways. He believes in love and loyalty. How quaint. I've shown him what he's been missing: excitement, adventure, a mind that truly understands his ambitions. He's already halfway in my pocket. Lila glared through tears. Marcus will never forgive you for this. He will find me. Scarlett's bright laughter echoed in the dank basement. You think so? Don't be so sure. As we speak, Marcus is on a flight to Singapore. He won't be back for days. By the time he realizes you're missing, I'll have spun a story so perfect the authorities will doubt whether you simply ran away in a fit of postpartum distress. And if he does suspect foul play, well, I have a feeling he'll be too busy grappling with the lies. I've told him to trust his own instincts. She leaned in, whispering in Lila's ear. By the time he sorts through the chaos, you'll be long gone. Maybe I'll let you go once I'm certain you won't cause trouble. Or maybe I won't. Lila shivered, terror rolling through her. She had to keep her mind clear for her baby's sake. She must find a way out, or at least survive until Marcus could save her. The days that followed blended into a hazy nightmare. The basement became Lila's prison. Scarlett rarely appeared in person, delegating most of the grunt work to her hired men. Whenever Scarlett did visit, it was to taunt Lila, brandishing the power she now held. Lila quickly realized the men were under strict orders to keep her alive. Perhaps Scarlett understood that killing a pregnant woman would spark more outrage and investigation than a simple disappearance. They brought her meager rations of bread, water, and occasionally broth. The cold, damp air made Lila's joints ache, and her belly, now visibly pronounced, grew heavier each day. She was plagued by nightmares and hounded by a throbbing concern for the child within her, especially given the unsanitary conditions. Her ankles and wrists were raw from the ropes, and her voice hoarse from pleading with the guards for leniency. Yet, in her darkest moments, Lila steeled herself with a fierce maternal resolve. She remembered the love in Marcus's eyes when he first learned she was pregnant. She recalled the warmth of her father's embrace, her mother's gentle bedtime stories, and the philanthropic dreams that had once guided her life. She refused to give in to despair. She observed everything around her, searching for weaknesses or vulnerabilities. She noted that the overhead light flickered occasionally, indicating a possible electrical fault. She counted the steps of the men who came to feed her, noticing how they locked the basement door from the outside. She memorized the position of tools, crates, anything that might be used as a weapon or to pry herself free. Time felt disjointed. She didn't know how many hours or days passed. It seemed like an eternity until one morning, the heavier of her two captors, called Vince by the other man, forgot to retie her ropes after loosening them to allow her to use the makeshift bathroom corner. He was in a hurry, perhaps due to a phone call. They locked the basement door as usual, but the rope was looser than normal. Lila's heart jolted. She waited until nightfall, when the house above seemed still, the faint hum of conversation indicating the men were likely stationed in the living room or the old kitchen. Holding her breath, she wriggled her wrists with agonizing slowness. The rope chafed, but it gave more than usual. Her heart thundered, adrenaline spiking as she worked methodically, ignoring her fatigue, until finally her right hand slipped free. Pain radiated through her cramped muscles, but she forced herself to proceed. Once both hands were liberated, she untied her ankles and cautiously stood, bracing herself against a wooden support column to steady her trembling legs. She glanced around, scanning for anything that could help her break out. In a corner, She spotted an old crowbar among a pile of rusting tools. Fearful of making noise, she tiptoed over, each step echoing in the basement's emptiness. She tested the door at the top of the short flight of stairs and found it locked from the outside. Gritting her teeth, she wedged the crowbar near the handle. Her hands trembled with exertion as she pushed. The lock whined in protest, but it seemed sturdy. Another push, no success. She stifled a sob of frustration, remembering that the overhead light fixture flickered. Perhaps there was another way out. She spotted a small, boarded-up window near the ceiling, on the far side of the basement. Dragging a rickety chair across the floor, Lila positioned it under the boards. She climbed carefully, every movement sending lightning bolts of pressure through her pregnant belly. Gasping, she jammed the crowbar into a gap between the boards. Wood groaned, nails squeaked, and after a moment, 2 boards gave way, revealing a glass pane behind them. She pried the glass with the crowbar, wincing as shards cracked, threatening to clatter loudly onto the concrete. Just then, footsteps on the stairs caused her to freeze. One of the men was coming. They must have heard something. In a heartbeat, Lila dropped to the floor, her knees buckling. She hid behind an old metal shelf, pressing her hand over her mouth to stifle ragged breaths. The basement door swung open, a beam of light cutting through the gloom. A guard's silhouette loomed at the top of the stairs. "Hey," he muttered, "you hear something?" Another voice from behind him sneered. "You're paranoid, man." The guard took a few steps down, flicking a flashlight around. Lila pressed herself tight against the corner, silent prayers coursing through her mind. The light skimmed the floor, illuminating the space beneath the shelves. She feared her pale ankles might give her away. Fortunately, he stopped short of the corner. After a nerve-shredding pause, the guard grumbled something and headed back upstairs. The door slammed shut and the lock clicked. Lila let out a silent exhale. If she had broken through the boards a moment later, the men would have discovered her. Her chance at freedom would vanish, and worse. They would likely tighten security and keep her bound or chained. She had to act swiftly and stealthily. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in Singapore, Marcus Carter was restless in his luxury suite. The neon skyline shone through floor-to-ceiling windows, but he found no joy in it. Days had passed since he last heard Lila's voice. She hadn't responded to his calls or texts, which was unlike her. He assumed she might be angry at him or upset about the swirling rumors that even he was beginning to question. Despite Scarlett's supportive demeanor, something in Marcus's gut told him that he was missing critical pieces of the puzzle. He started scanning social media for any trace of Lila. Usually, she might post a foundation update or a personal note about the pregnancy. But her accounts were silent. Growing alarmed, Marcus contacted Jasmine Moore, Lila's best friend. Jasmine confirmed that Lila hadn't been at home or at the foundation offices for days. Marcus's concern skyrocketed into panic. Frantically, Marcus booked the earliest flight back to New York, ignoring Scarlett's attempts to dissuade him. She tried to calm him with half-baked explanations. Maybe Lila needed space. Maybe she'd taken a trip. But Marcus sensed an urgency that eclipsed everything else. During the long flight home, his mind churned, replaying suspicious details, Scarlett's carefully timed presence, the rumors about Lila that never quite felt authentic, the earring in the limo. His heart hammered with the realization that he might have been manipulated. Upon landing, Marcus rushed straight to the penthouse, finding it silent and devoid of Lila's comforting presence. James, the butler, informed him of Lila's abrupt departure days earlier, explaining how she'd received a call and left in a hurry. She hadn't returned. Marcus discovered that none of her possessions were missing, an unlikely scenario if she'd decided to vanish on her own. Notably, her prenatal vitamins, phone charger, and favorite coat were still there. Marcus called the phone number from which Lila had last received a call, only to find it was disconnected. He then alerted the police, lodging a missing persons report. Within hours, the story hit the news. A pregnant philanthropist from a renowned family was missing. The city buzzed with speculation. Scarlett tried to maintain her facade, feigning concern and offering help. Marcus, however, had grown wary, picking up subtle contradictions in her stories. She claimed Lila had once confided certain relationship problems in her, a lie so blatant that Marcus's stomach twisted in disbelief. Lila would never trust Scarlett Delgado with personal secrets. Swiftly, he launched his own private investigation. He discovered that Scarlett Delgado had minimal records prior to a year ago, that her claimed family background was suspiciously vague. He also found out that large sums of money had been quietly withdrawn from the Carter Foundation's discretionary accounts using his electronic signature, but at times and in places he had not authorized. Haunted by guilt and fear for Lila's safety, Marcus began to suspect the unthinkable. Scarlett had orchestrated Lila's disappearance. The question was where and how to rescue her before it was too late. Down in her subterranean prison, Lila sensed her chance to break free would be fleeting. She resumed her efforts on the boarded window, choosing a moment late at night when the house fell silent. Inch by inch, she pried away at the boards, careful to set them aside quietly. Her whole body trembled with strain, her swollen belly pulling heavily on her back muscles. Finally, the opening was wide enough for her to squeeze through. She pressed gently, but the window itself was stuck. Summoning her last reserves of strength, she gave it a firm push. The glass cracked further, but the frame wouldn't budge. She fought the tears, threatening to well up. She had to maintain her determination. She used the crowbar, sliding it along the edges until, with a sudden snap, the window swung outward. A blast of cold night air hit her face. She nearly sobbed in relief. Positioning the rickety chair under the window, she crawled up. She winced as the corners of the broken glass cut into her arms and legs. She stifled a cry when a shard bit into her shoulder, drawing warm blood. Holding back tears, she contorted her body, mindful of her protruding belly, and began to inch her way through the opening. Her entire being screamed with pain, but she reminded herself she had no other choice for her life. For her baby's life. Suddenly she heard muffled shouting from upstairs. She froze. Perhaps one of the men had come down to check on her again. If they found her in mid-escape, it would be over. She forced herself to move faster, ignoring the searing agony in her ribs. Her legs dangled outside, about 3 feet above the ground. She lowered herself carefully. The moment her feet touched the cold earth, she shifted aside to avoid stepping on stray glass shards. The shouting grew louder. Lights flicked on around the estate. Lila realized they must have discovered she was no longer in the basement. She had seconds, maybe less, to hide. She darted toward a tangle of overgrown bushes near the side of the property. Her breath came in sharp, ragged bursts, her heart pounding as if it would burst from her chest. Just as she concealed herself, the basement door at the side of the house burst open. One of the men cursed, shining a flashlight around wildly. She huddled, one hand over her mouth to stifle any whimpers, the other cradling her belly. The beams of the flashlight swept over the yard, grazing just feet away from her hiding spot. She bit down on her lip, tears streaming down her cheeks. If she was caught now, they'd never let her out of that basement alive. But luck was with her. The man stomped back inside, possibly to alert the others or search another part of the property. Summoning her courage, Lila rose and made a run for it, forging a path through the thick, dark woods that bordered the estate. Thorns scratched her ankles, twigs snapped beneath her feet. She was running on pure adrenaline and maternal instinct, her body screaming for rest. In the far distance, she saw headlights on a road. She stumbled toward them, praying for a passing car or a house or anything that would lead to rescue. She heard dogs barking. Scarlett must have had guard dogs. They began baying in the yard, the sound sending tremors through Lila's entire being. She pushed through the pain, forcing one foot in front of the other. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of desperate scrambling, she reached a lonely stretch of asphalt. She collapsed to her knees, tears of relief mingling with terror. Looking around, she spotted a faint glow from a distant porch light. She mustered every ounce of willpower and continued onward, hugging the side of the road until she found a small cottage. Lights were on, suggesting someone might be awake. She dragged herself to the door, blood seeping from cuts on her arms, her cheeks stained with grime and tears. She pounded on the door with the last of her strength, voice barely more than a raspy whisper, "Please, help, please." The door creaked open, revealing a startled older couple, Mr. and Miss S. Anderson, who gasped at the sight of the battered, pregnant woman on their doorstep. Without hesitation, they scooped her inside, calling 911. An ambulance rushed Lila to the nearest hospital, where doctors and nurses swiftly attended to her injuries. Dr. Emily Parker, a longtime friend, received an urgent page. When she saw Lila's name, her face paled with shock. She raced to the ER, relief flooding her when she found Lila alive, albeit in terrible shape. The baby, miraculously, was stable. The police arrived soon after, and Lila recounted her harrowing ordeal. Detectives immediately initiated a search for the remote estate in Westchester. The property, however, was empty by the time they arrived. Scarlett's men had fled, leaving few traces. But Lila's testimony, combined with records of the Shell Corporation that owned the property and phone logs that placed Scarlett Delgado's associates there, formed a damning case. News outlets erupted. A philanthropic icon's pregnant wife had been kidnapped by an alleged mistress, who was now on the run. The city's collective empathy for Lila surged. Where was Scarlett Delgado? Where were her henchmen? Marcus Carter arrived at the hospital, having left a flurry of frantic messages once he learned Lila was found. He sprinted through the corridors, guilt strangling his every step. As soon as he saw Lila resting in bed, covered in bandages but conscious, he fell to his knees at her bedside, tears wetting his cheeks. "I'm so sorry," he choked out. "I failed you, failed our baby. I should have seen through her lies." Even in her frail condition, Lila lifted a hand to his cheek. She was too exhausted for anger. Relief at seeing him overshadowed all else. "It's over," she managed, voice trembling. "She can't hurt us anymore." Marcus stayed by her side, vowing not to leave until he was certain of her safety. The guilt of his betrayal, the emotional distance, the flirtation with Scarlett nearly consumed him. He was determined to protect Lila, to ensure their unborn child would come into a safer world than the one Scarlett had forced them to endure. Within a day, the police located one of Scarlett's henchmen, Vince, at a motel. Under interrogation, he cracked, revealing Scarlett's deeper involvement. An international manhunt began, as evidence suggested Scarlett had fled the country, possibly leveraging her questionable ties in Europe. Arrest warrants were issued. Investigators discovered large sums wired from the Carter Foundation's accounts to offshore locations. Public sentiment turned violently against Scarlett Delgado, who had now become a notorious figure. Lila spent weeks recuperating, her injuries healing slowly under Dr. Parker's vigilant care. Psychologically, she bore the scars of those agonizing days in the basement, but her resilience shone. She resolved to move forward with the pregnancy, cherishing her baby as a beacon of hope. Marcus, profoundly remorseful, committed himself to rebuilding her trust. The Carter Foundation also reeled from the scandal. Donors demanded explanations, and new audits were initiated to track the siphoned funds. Marcus stepped forward publicly, admitting his lapse in judgment that allowed Scarlett into their lives. He used the ordeal to highlight the dangers of unchecked trust, promising stricter oversight. Many donors, moved by Lila's ordeal, rallied around the foundation. Lila received an outpouring of support from the community. She chose to address her experience publicly, not to relive the trauma, but to advocate for survivors of domestic violence and kidnapping. She launched a new initiative focusing on rescue and rehabilitation for vulnerable women, naming it the Phoenix Project, a reference to rising from the ashes of adversity. Late one afternoon, well into her third trimester, Lila stood at a private press conference. Cameras flashed, capturing her composed smile and her prominent belly. Journalists asked about her ordeal, about Scarlett Delgado, and about the next steps for the Carter Foundation. Lila spoke calmly, her voice laced with strength. "I refuse to let fear define me or my child's life. We have seen the worst a manipulative individual can do, but we have also witnessed the power of empathy, courage, and community. I stand before you today only because of the kindness of strangers, the dedication of law enforcement, and the unwavering love of my husband. And I want to use this second chance to help others." Applause erupted. Marcus, standing beside her, gently clasped her hand, tears glistening in his eyes. Life would never be exactly the same, but Lila and Marcus walked forward with renewed perspective. The illusions were shattered, replaced by an unvarnished truth. Trust must be earned and safeguarded, and love without vigilance can be exploited by those with malicious intent. Epilogue: a few months later, Lila gave birth to a healthy baby girl, whom they named Hope. As Lila cradled her daughter for the first time, she wept tears of happiness, sorrow, and gratitude. The world beyond the hospital window was complicated and often cruel, but at that moment, all that mattered was the tiny life in her arms. The darkness Scarlett Delgado had unleashed had not prevailed. Instead, a flame of hope had been kindled, lighting the path for a stronger future. Thank you for joining us on this tumultuous journey of love, betrayal, and ultimate triumph. Lila's ordeal is a powerful reminder that trust and vigilance are vital in our lives. Even in the most glamorous circles, deception can lurk behind the brightest smiles, and it's up to us to protect those we love by listening to our instincts and seeking truth. Her story serves as a testament to resilience. No matter how dark the situation may seem, hope and courage can emerge victorious. If you found this story gripping, heart-wrenching, and ultimately inspiring, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support fuels more incredible stories that shine a light on human strength and perseverance. Spread the word and help others discover how love and determination can triumph over even the most sinister of conspiracies. Thank you, and we'll see you in our next video.